In this section, I want to delve a little deeper into the central tenets of the frantic method. Many of the processes you might have employed so far have created some work, but how do you take that further? How do you develop that performance? We talk about building blocks all of the time when we make work, but what do we really mean by that? For me, a building block is a simple creative task, a simple instruction that engages everybody to think purely about that task and to exist in the moment and explore the possibilities and potentials of that moment. So within building blocks, we employ tasks, and often people ask, what is a task? For me, it's a simple instruction, but you have to be quite careful about this, because if your task elicits a response which is just yes or no, then you've presented a closed question. You need to be thinking about open questions, so your tasks need to unfold. They also present a particular dynamic. You, as the director, are asking the performers to embark upon a task. There are many benefits to setting tasks for your performers, especially when they're very simple and using building blocks. You just add complexity and add complexity. But one of the most important things to state is that dynamic that it presents. You're on the outside setting the task, your performers are on the inside purely responding to the task. They can present stuff that only you see, and that can be inspiring, it can surprise you, it can be really challenging too. It will teach you something about the moment that you didn't know before you set the task. Tasks also employ the people around the moment to comment, to become critical observers, and that can be incredibly useful to help you build that understanding about the potential of the work that you are making. Crucially, we're not relying on the experience of the performers, because the performers are the only people in any production who never see the work. We're exploring the potential understanding of the people on the outside, and we're taking that and adding that to the work. We're empowering our performers with all of that knowledge further down the line. A good task will liberate your performers, but what does that mean? Performers are often very generous in that they want to please you, they want to get it right. They think that you've got a particular idea in mind that they want to hit. It might be that you don't have that in mind, and tasks are set up to challenge that anyway. So a good task will liberate the performers from taking any responsibility for the show, for anything other than the task in hand. A performer who's trying to guess what you want from them is already self-editing. They're already throwing out possibilities thinking, well, this isn't what they want. And that's not helpful, because you want to be surprised. You want to see something you haven't thought of yet. And it's crucial that you have performers who are liberated and empowered to explore. There's another important concept I want you to think of when applying building blocks. We call it non-destructive editing. Now, this is what you might do if you're editing digitally. If you were creating a film, you can try stuff. You can cut, you can splice, you can reverse, you can add an effect, and if it doesn't work, you delete and you go back to what you had before, and there's no damage. If you can think about your exploration, your task, and your building blocks as non-destructive editing, then you are liberated to try stuff you might not have done if you felt it was going to destroy the work you've already made. But if it's non-destructive editing, you can be as wild as you want, see whether it works, and if not, just come back to what you had before. So we're going to explore some building blocks, and to do that, we're just going to make a really basic string of material. We're going to use the process round by through. It's very important at this stage that the material we make has no story. It's empty. It just moves. It can be absolutely arbitrary. That gives us a good, solid, clean starting point. So let's make some work. When you set up a task like this and you're using building blocks, it's really important to keep your discipline. You've got to resist the temptation of heading straight towards that finished idea, because then you might throw out so many things you could find along the way. I'm not saying you discard the image of what you want to get to. You keep hold of it, but keep it to yourself. That way you're open to surprises. You're open to finding new things along the way. Keep yourself open to detours. Keep yourself open to trying new things. Remember, think of the non-destructive editing. You can try stuff. You can always return. You might discover something brilliant. It might be terrible. It doesn't matter. You can always return. A really important thing to consider here is that I'm actually employing the outside eye. So much of this is not going to be about the experience of the performers. They're just concentrating on the task. I'm trying to get the perspective of those around the event to say what they see so that I get a greater understanding of the potential of the relationships of where we might take this work. I'm afforded that privilege because I'm a director. I can be on the outside. If you are a performer who also happens to be making the work, how can you get that outside eye? Do you set up a camera? Do you watch the work that you're making? Or do you find time to step outside? Do you ask people what they see and keep an open mind about what that is? All of that is really important. And remember what is so different about this. You are often asked as the performer how you feel about it. This time we're not allowing you that privilege. We're actually just asking you to commit to the task. And we're asking all the people around to say what they see. You as a performer can gather that information. You as a director can gather that information, and it empowers you both to make more nuanced and complex work. So Sean and Krista have made a very simple string of material based on some very clear instructions, round by through. And now Jess and Paolo are going to explore the potential using building blocks.
I think it's really useful for us just to see a really clear, almost marked version like that, so we see like each step of the small choices that you've made there. So at the moment we can still see where the around stops and the by starts, or when the by stops and the through starts, and I wonder now, it's not about going quicker, but I wonder if it's about making the whole thing continuous, so as soon as you are into one move you're already sort of morphing into the next, so the whole thing becomes one long continuous string. Might give us more options for the next bit. So after they'd made their initial string of material, our first building block was to get them to make that string very continuous.
Then we told them to compress the air between them and add more weight to their duet.
Go the other way. No? I think it was the other arm. That's it. Good.
That particular moment where something goes wrong and you're not quite sure how you're communicating that moment, from the outside eye, that can be something much more complex, because you guys just want to get through the choreography as set and are being challenged by these new building blocks. But we might see a much more fragile relationship or a more volatile relationship than we'd presumed beforehand. And that's really useful to us. I'd like to take where you are at the moment and push it a little bit further. So when you're giving weight to each other, I want you to think about getting your feet as far away from each other all of the time. Okay, so you're gonna have to find that balance. The shapes will change, the relationships will change, and you're gonna have to just negotiate that. And again, let's just see what we see on the outside. It changes everything.
Yeah.
And even seeing that, it fluctuates between whether they need each other or whether they need to be apart. It's changing all the time. And sometimes the complexity is exactly what I think it is. Sometimes it really surprises me. And there was a moment at the end where I think, Krista, you had his hand. There was a real struggle, and the hand just went like there because you needed it there. But just the act of doing that, of placing someone's hand on you because you needed it to stay up, suggested a relationship and a complexity of a relationship that was really interesting. Now, that might not be where we want to go. And that happened because we had a string of material. If we'd just asked you to improvise, just to jump straight in, you could have been lost, you might not have known how to play. You're both very experienced performers, so that was easy for you. But something like this of having created the round by through, adding a little bit of weight, then adding a little bit more and finding yourself doing something like this, you get to a place where you wouldn't have found yourself if you had just said, why don't you just throw your weight against each other and improvise?
So we really liked what we found in that version. We found lots of really exciting, dynamic things, but we're going to take the duet back a few steps now, back to the weighty, continuous version to take it off in a new direction again.
Our hope is to get things being a bit more physical and dynamic and see how far we can take that.
As I'm watching the development of these duets, I'm wanting to get involved, to jump in and talk about character and touch and the moments before touch, the moments afterwards, and these are the other tenets of the frantic method. Things like the presumptions and the three universes, but for clarity's sake, we want to just stick looking at the building blocks for now. Of course, when we make work, we bring it all together and we consider all of these things, but for now, just the clarity of the building blocks.
One thing that I'm just kind of noticing, and I think it's something to do with the difference in height and them as individuals, but something about Sean's eye line being down, and I think I'd like to play with a kind of avoidance from Sean and the focus from Krista being trying to get his attention.
I'd like to try something with the eyes as well, because I think having Krista look at Sean and Sean away tells us one story, and we know it right from the beginning, and it just tells the same story throughout. I don't know what the next one's going to tell us, but the next building block is that both of you never look at each other. It's about looking out, but see whether your hands can still have that same relationship, whether your bodies have that same relationship, but you're never looking for each other, you're always looking away. So the reason for doing this is precisely because I don't know what it is, but it just refreshes the palette, because we started to find a story and a relationship, and they start to go, oh, I think I know what this is about, you know, and it's really important to go, no, it's not about that.
Do you know what's funny about that? Even though we're getting them to not pay attention to each other, for some reason I feel like they're closer.
Yes.
I don't know what you feel the same. Yeah.
It's really interesting, isn't it? It felt like there was a unity and a defiance to the world.
Yeah, and I think it came from that really simple instruction you gave them, which is to be more, to look for something or look for someone else, or be more direct rather than avoiding each other. It completely changes.
It meant that their contact did all the work. So their touch did the work of telling us that they were together. It's a little bit like the simplicity and brilliance of that moment where someone just does that and you don't flinch. It tells me that we have an intimate relationship, and I can actually adjust your clothing and it's okay. So here, it's a bit extreme, this version, but your touch was telling us that you're connected, you were defiant, you were strong, even though it seemed like we were asking you to do exact opposite. You were just looking around at the world. What that gives is a nuanced understanding of relationships and how they tell the world that they are connected. It's not by looking into each other's eyes and going, we're connected, we love each other. This isn't just about love. This felt about something much more complex than that. It felt like experience. This is a bit of a strange one. I just want to try that again. I want you to do it, but I don't want you to manipulate using the palms of your hands. I don't want the palms of the hands to touch the body. What it's going to do is really highlight to us where the contact exists. It might help to visualize the building blocks process as you being at the bottom of a tree and you want to get to the top. And as you progress up that tree, you meet branches. And you could take a detour down a branch, meet another branch. You could end up on a twig and end up on a leaf, which presents a view of the world that you might not have anticipated. And it might not be right, so you come back and take another step up the tree. Think of that tree as being full of viewpoints and perspectives that you wouldn't possibly have imagined. You might have only imagined one at the very top, but here is a world of all kinds of possibilities. Now, if you think of the non-destructive editing, that allows you to safely move along those branches, to see that view of the world, to see whether it's the right one for you, and to come back if it's not, and to continue your journey up the tree.
So we decided to change a few things in this next run through. The first thing is where they're looking. So when they're moving together, they're going to be looking away from each other. When they explode apart, they're going to be looking towards each other.
And also, although we've established these moments apart, we'd like to play with distance and how far apart they move, because so far the three moments are very similar and that becomes too predictable. So we're going to give a bit of agency where they're going to decide how far away they move, if they drop contact at all, and then see what comes of that.
The coming back together is actually where the interest lies somehow, in that it feels like such a big choice of whoever these characters are.
We didn't necessarily say that there was a rule that you have to come back in the exact same way, like reverse the movement. You have the authority to find another way.
What about if we look at the size of each explosion? So we're going to run it again with two small adjustments. First one is we're going to think about where we're looking, and we'd love to try, when you're together, as you've been doing, looking away from each other. When you're apart, you're going to look at each other. The journey back towards each other is the journey of you finding somewhere else to look as well.
Sometimes we don't have to necessarily go as far, it might just be smaller. Sometimes there might still be contact left, so it might just be that I've left a point of contact there.
Well, you've gone from creating something that was explosive, but as you said, predictable. And now what was the most explosive is possibly the most delicate. So that's a lovely discovery to find there.
So here we've already started to make things a bit more physical. We've looked for lifts. We found a couple of opportunities where we've pressed more into our duets and looked for ledges so that we can allow lifts to arise.
Our next building block is going to be to try and get it to move around the space a bit more, to use all of this space, so we get we cover the most space, and this is the most kind of dynamic version that we've made so far. We will also think about increasing the pace. I don't think we have to set like a trajectory, do we? So our next step was to try and get the duet to use as much space as possible. So we used the existing contact, the pushes and pulls, and started to travel them around the room.
And now that things are becoming bigger, it's about finding play and finding the fun in these sequences.
Will you stay with me? Will you stay with me?
So we've used building blocks to take ourselves through this process. Now, we might have wanted to create a duet that moved in just the way we've demonstrated, but along the way we've also found a really delicate tension between the performers. We found quite a physical struggle as well. These are different ways to tell different stories, and we don't discard them, we bank them, because for something else they might be the perfect way to tell the story. But it's the building blocks that allows that. It takes us to places we hadn't expected. It also means that the performers present work they didn't expect either, because you've given them a world that is free of all that responsibility for the final presentation. They're just existing in the moment, and so are we, learning from what they're showing us.
Stay with me.
We use the building blocks to give our actors that really clear and minimal instruction at every stage. And hopefully that should lead to some really authentic responses and material.
The building blocks make the process really accessible to everybody. So it means that everybody can collaborate and contribute in a really clear, well thought out way.
As a performer, I think it's a fantastic thing to engage with the building blocks process, because it takes away all the anxiety that you might sometimes have of what are we going to produce and create. And you as a performer of trying to give answers too soon, which might then stop the creative flow from the get-go for yourself.
For a performer, what the building blocks bring, it gives an opportunity for us to collaborate without having to think about how we're going to collaborate. Just by carrying out the task, carrying out the instruction, and offering physicality and moves to the material, we get to make offers without having to put too much thought into what it is and let the observers and the directors work out how to interpret that material.
And what we found in the room was that the actors' responses offered us new possibilities and avenues that we otherwise wouldn't have thought of. And they didn't intend to. These answers came about by them just responding to our really clear instruction.
It just opens up loads of other possibilities that we wouldn't have thought about on our own. It gives us the opportunity to take one step, stand back and have a look at it, and not have to come up with all the answers straight away, and not have to think about what the end is before you've explored everything on the way. And I think it just means that with the performers and with us, we come up with something that we wouldn't have been able to come up with on our own, so it takes us on an unexpected journey.
Today, what the building blocks allowed me to do as a performer is to really be in the moment and allow the building blocks to, for myself, to not go into the habits that I might normally do, for example, physically. So I discovered many more things about what I might have as a performer to offer into the room at that very moment.
Today it gave us an ability to be liberated and be free by allowing us to kind of focus on one thing at a time, so that we could focus on going faster or focus on the eye contact that allowed us to go in one direction, explore one thing, and then really easily come back and then go in a completely different direction. So it allowed us to kind of just be free, focus on one thing, and discover lots of things by just doing that.
By using these building blocks in the drama studio or the professional rehearsal room, what you see is this level playing field start to occur, and we allow us to move forward together.
I can't imagine a process really now where I wouldn't implement this building block process, just because I think it gives us so many benefits. It gives the performers such an ownership over the material, and it gives us as creatives a real chance to build things gradually and really assess in which direction we want to go. I think it just gets so much more out of people because they feel ownership on it, and because they come with you on that journey. It means that in whichever direction you go, they are coming along with you, rather than starting with the end idea and sort of planting it onto them and convincing them that that's the thing they should do. Actually going through this process means that everybody comes along with it and becomes part of the, feels like the end product is really influenced by them, and I think that's really empowering.
What the building blocks can bring to the drama studio and a professional rehearsal room is to really build a common ground. It starts from a simple, even warm-ups and skills building all the way through there. When you are building from something that's simple, it allows us to all feel that the room is accessible for everybody. And yeah, just building on everybody to take that journey together.
It provides us with a scaffolding to work with. So if we've got nothing in the room, we can come back to it. We can interrogate any piece of material, any small thing that we've got. We're even just looking in the space and finding a building block that we can jump onto, and it allows us to start generating content in the space.
I think it's really helpful for you to keep things simple and make your instructions at every stage of the building blocks really clear.
When you make some material from a task, don't underestimate how much you might need to rehearse that string of material before you start to apply any of these building blocks. I think it's really important to get the core bit of material that you're going to work with really well learnt and of really kind of feeling solid in your body and good quality before you try and add loads of other stuff or take stuff away from it. And I think, then you can always go backwards, but just starting from a really strong place I know you're often under lots of time pressure, but I think actually it saves time in the long run if you rehearse that initial step.
One of the biggest things that we often really say is to keep things simple. And I guess what that always means to us is even if you have first one idea, that is your first building block. Trust that, set that really clearly what that is, and make sure, like Jess has said earlier, that that first building block is very grounded and solid before you move into the next one.
My tips in classrooms is that when you're devising, you're often the performers and the directors. Take those opportunities, find those opportunities to come out and almost assign those roles. Find times when you can just be the actor inside the performance. Find those moments where you can be the director and assign those roles so that you can find those moments to observe and you can give that feedback so that when you're acting in something, you can just be in it.
I think be brave. Let the building blocks surprise you. Be really clear in your instruction, be really clear in your response. Don't try and overcomplicate it. I think these moments, they need to be simple. Building blocks by definition are simple and robust. So think of it in those terms, don't overcomplicate it. And I would say, allow yourself to make work that doesn't work. Not everything does work, but we learn so much from it. And that's why building blocks is so important, because we just come back. It doesn't destroy anything. We just learn from it and we add and we move on step by step, and we take everybody with us at the same rate and we learn together.